Patrick Henningsen and TNT.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We're into the final segment of the first hour here. Very pleased to bring on to the line independent journalist, historian, author based in the UK, Tony Gosling. Tony, we are witnessing extraordinary times in politics, full stop. In British politics, I'm seeing things that I have never seen before, and it is shocking, to say the least, to watch the establishment's reaction to a by-election. One MP from what many would regard, Tony, as a fringe party. How could this possibly be a threat to the establishment? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been fascinating to watch this, and I was very lucky because I just by coincidence had scheduled on a guy called Steve Hall, the author of The Death of the Left, who's a member of George Galloway's Workers' Party. He's a retired lecturer, criminologist. And we had a really entertaining time talking about Galloway because, of course, the fact is he's shown up the establishment magnificently in the fact that you've had to have, like, literally the day he's elected, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who Galloway refers to as Prime Miniature in his brilliant, it's almost like having a Trump on this side, with these entertaining stand-up comedy political speeches. Actually having to come out into the plinth outside 10 Downing Street and denounce Galloway and denounce all he stands for on the day he gets actually elected. And this, of course, is a man who was never elected to be Prime Minister at all. So the irony, you can imagine in pubs all around the country on Friday, people just guffawing with laughter to see Galloway punch a hole right through this pathetic illusion that is the Goldman Sachs, King Charles, World Economic Forum, COP23 illusion and delusion, actually confidence trick that they've been trying to pull over here. So yeah, it's actually, I find it incredibly entertaining to watch because of George's comic style of poking fun at these idiots, and also of course it's a breath of fresh air, Patrick.
So tell us what is the man on the street in Britain, Tony? Your average working class person across the country. They must be looking at this and probably, I would say, being more sympathetic towards George Galloway on this. And I don't know, what has there been a reaction? I know, Tony, amongst us heavily politically active critics of foreign policy and the establishment, I know where we stand generally on this, but what about general population, Tony?
Well, let me say probably it's in Scotland, the north of England and east of London, where George Galloway has been an MP. And also people do follow these types of left politics more. And obviously George himself is Scottish. There's been a lot more people following this in the cosy West London. This guy is seen as a pariah because he's dangerous in some way. But of course, the press has given him an incredibly hard time. It's a bit like when Ken Livingstone was the leader of the Greater London Council, a left-wing leader back in the Thatcher era. The press, have just gone for people like Galloway, and it's been very difficult, except through places maybe like the BBC sometimes, to actually get a look in. Particularly Sky News and the Murdoch empire hates everything Galloway stands for because, let's face it, I mean, many people might say, oh, gosh, this is Marxist, it's terrible. Well, he's a bit of a Marxist, but he's much more, actually, a traditional 1950s, 1960s British socialist. And the idea here is that you've got to have, this is Michael Hudson's type of economics, you may know him, where you've got to have a state that has got ownership and control of the infrastructure of the country. And this is what Galloway believes, that you've got to have the railways and all this sort of stuff, the electricity, gas, water, in public ownership. Otherwise, what's the point in voting? And of course, this is why so few people vote in our modern elections, Patrick, is because they know that the big corporations like Rishi Sunak's Goldman Sachs are actually running the show and own this stuff. So yes, I think it's fair to say, yes, of course, people like you and I will probably pay more attention to this. But what's happened on the left? It's just really important to understand. is the left is now beginning to learn the lessons of Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party, because Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party were gnawing away at the ankles of the Tories back in 2010 through to the Brexit referendum in 2016, and they forced that referendum onto Cameron. Now, old Keir Starmer has got a similar dog attached itself to his ankle, chewing away on the left-wing official state party. So and also it's not just Galloway on his own. He's got some other very good former MPs that were kicked out of the Corbyn in the Corbyn era by Corbyn, because Corbyn treated his enemies like Rachel Reeves better than his friends, like Chris Williamson, the former MP for Derby. And one of the things that separates these parties from the mainstream, Patrick, is the Palestine issue. Both Galloway has been campaigning on Palestine since the 1980s. I mean, he's a veteran of many decades of this campaign, and I think this is coming to define British politics. Are you for genocide or against genocide? And Galloway has very much made his point very clear, and we're going to see some really entertaining speeches, I'm quite certain, in the House of Commons over the next few months. Of course, he's got to prove himself in the next few months to see if he can actually get in as Rochdale MP again when it comes to the general election, which isn't going to be easy for him.
No, indeed. And you made the big point there, Tony, is that the big threat from George Galloway, of course, is the foreign policy piece. And again, punching a hole, as you said, right through that total facade of foreign policy, or independent foreign policy, that Britain claims to have, when in reality, they're really just kind of following Washington's lead on just about everything, acting as a partner, enabler, nothing independent going on there in Westminster in terms of where it stands on all these very important issues. And the blowback's coming, isn't it, Tony, on this? Voters are not ignorant to what's happening in Gaza, I think, more than ever in history. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, like the Brexit Party, Galloway's Workers' Party, it's just over the weekend, I was hearing on the grapevine, had a massive surge in membership. So many Brits who've heard about this party for the first time in the mainstream press because of this by-election are signing up with their £5 a month as members of Galloway's party. And they have a very sensible, very simple, I think it's 8-point plan to do with renationalising infrastructure, rejuvenating British industry. And you know what, Patrick, the most fascinating things about this party is it's very well educated in the financial scams, the financial system. So that is to say, the fiat currency, the money system controlled by the, that place which is defended by those 50 or something dragons called the City of London, and the way that they control the nation's finances. Well, the Workers' Party's got an extremely good critique of them, and it's talking about using the Bank of England to begin a kind of renaissance in British industry. So we're not just talking about massive factories, because a lot of this stuff can now be robotized, but they're talking about Britain becoming the first country to really embrace this new economic paradigm where we can actually do what we want with money. We don't have to do what the bankers did to Gaddafi, these people who wanted to stop him having his own gold dinar. So a real revolution, actually, in the finance sector. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why the British establishment is most afraid of Galloway, and that they're putting pressure on the mass media to vilify him the whole time, is because in the background of his brilliant policies to do with domestic and foreign policy is this understanding of the fraud of the fiat money system. And this, I think, could possibly be rattling them more than almost anything else, Patrick.
No, absolutely. It's good to see them also putting their finger on the financial issues. You said that is really the foundational block of so many different issues and problems. It's almost revolutionary to see anybody in politics even challenge central banking policy on anything. So that in a sense, I think is very positive. But yeah, on the foreign policy piece, people are dying for leadership. They're dying for dissenting opinions. They're dying for people to stand up and call out what is clearly crimes against humanity right now happening in Gaza at the hands of the Israelis, enabled by the US, enabled by Britain, enabled by the EU, Germany, etc., getting away with horrendous crimes on a scale that we have not seen in the modern era. So, George Galloway's monologues and what the opposition, his opposition might call soliloquies on the floor of the House of Commons, they're going to become epic rants, Tony. That's what we're going to get.
I think. Well, I was also amazed to hear him getting compliments on his oratory abilities from Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Tory MP and the landowner. So there are people, I think, on the Tory side that actually admire left-wingers who stick to their actual roots and principles, and also who can think on their feet. It was noticeable to see Galloway is one of those people that speaks from the heart. He doesn't read auto cues. He doesn't read scripts. And in fact, the best way as an interviewer to get a rise out of him, as I've found over the years, is to ask him a really, the sort of question which is having a dig at him, at his very roots of what he believes in. What you tend to get is a fantastic response, a fiery response. And that's one of the reasons that I love the guy so much. He is, I think, and of course he's like us. He's got his own thing. The talk show, it's called the mother of all talk shows. So he's very used to debating with all sorts of people on all sides. In fact, he's, I think, perfectly prepared to be, a real firebrand. Just looking at the Gaza policy for a minute, because this has obviously been a major plank in his campaign. I think it's been incredible to see. I think it was the end of last week in Haaretz, the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert actually talking about Armageddon, saying that this is what Netanyahu wants. He wants to have a massive
without
war.
A doubt. Without a doubt, we got our Armageddon coming up here at the top of the hour with our producer threatening to drop the hammer. Tony Gosling, thank you for joining us on TNT this week. Amazing.
Okay, yeah, just to say, it's thisweek.org.uk is my weekly show, Patrick. Thanks for having me on.
Check that in the chat room, folks. Follow Tony Gosling on his different channels and social media. We're going to go break now for the top of the hour news headlines. I'm Patrick Henningsen. We'll be catching up with you in just a few minutes on the other side. Stay right there.